She took a job as a maid, but the house owner knew her secret. Sarah Martinez had fallen further than she ever thought possible. From a corner office overlooking Manhattan to scrubbing someone else's floors, it was a humiliation that cut deeper than any financial loss. But when she applied for a housekeeping position at a luxurious penthouse, she never expected to find her old life staring back at her from the employer's desk. What starts as a desperate attempt to pay rent becomes something she never saw coming, a second chance she thought was lost forever. Today I have a story that will remind you that sometimes the people who see us most clearly are the ones we least expect. I hope you enjoy this tale of hidden truths and unexpected connections. The classified ad was simple enough. Housekeeper needed. Flexible hours. Discretion required. Good pay. Sarah Martinez stared at the newspaper clipping for the third time that morning, her coffee growing cold in the chipped ceramic mug. Discretion required. Those words should have been a warning, but when you're 3 months behind on rent and your bank account shows a balance of $47.23, warnings become luxuries you can't afford. She folded the paper carefully and placed it next to her laptop, where 17 job rejection emails sat in her inbox. Each one was a polite variation of the same message. While your qualifications are impressive, we've decided to move forward with another candidate. What they didn't say, what they couldn't say, was that her qualifications were too impressive. Former corporate executives don't typically apply for entry-level positions, and when they do, it raises questions employers would rather not deal with. Sarah's fingers traced the edge of her resume, the one she'd carefully edited to remove her MBA from Columbia, her years as a financial analyst at Sterling & Associates, and the promotion to senior partner that had once felt like the culmination of everything she'd worked for. Now, that same resume felt like evidence of a life that belonged to someone else entirely. The morning sun streamed through the thin curtains of her studio apartment, illuminating dust motes that danced above cardboard boxes she still hadn't unpacked. Moving to this neighborhood had been a necessity, not a choice. The rent was affordable, which in Manhattan meant the walls were thin, the heat inconsistent, and the neighbors colorful in ways that would have horrified her former colleagues. She reached for her phone and dialed the number from the ad before she could change her mind. It rang twice before a crisp, professional voice answered. Hawthorne Residence, Margaret speaking. Hi, I'm calling about the housekeeper position. Are you available for an interview today at 2 p.m.? Sarah blinked. No screening questions, no request for references. Yes, I can be there. Excellent. The address is 847 Fifth Avenue, Penthouse A. Ask for Mrs. Chen at the front desk. The line went dead before Sarah could ask any follow-up questions. She stared at her phone, then quickly Googled the address. The building was one of those pre-war giants that dominated the Upper East Side, the kind of place where a one-bedroom apartment cost more than most people's annual salaries. 3 hours later, Sarah stood in front of an imposing limestone facade, her reflection wavering in the polished brass doors. She'd chosen her most conservative outfit, a navy blazer she'd bought for client meetings in her previous life, paired with simple black pants and flats. Professional but not intimidating, she hoped. The lobby was a study in understated luxury. Marble floors reflected crystal chandeliers, and the concierge desk was manned by someone who looked like he'd stepped out of a magazine ad for expensive watches. Sarah approached hesitantly. I'm here to see Mrs. Chen about the housekeeper position. The concierge's expression didn't change, but she caught the slight way his eyes assessed her clothing, her posture, the small details that people in service industries learn to read. Penthouse A. Margaret will meet you at the elevator. The elevator ride to the 42nd floor felt endless. Sarah watched the numbers climb and tried to calm her racing heart. She'd negotiated million-dollar mergers, presented to boards of directors, fired employees who made more in a year than she'd seen in the past 6 months. A job interview to clean someone's house shouldn't feel this terrifying. The elevator doors opened to reveal a small, elegant foyer with only one door, Before Sarah could knock, it swung open to reveal a woman in her 50s with silver hair pulled back in a perfect chignon and knowing eyes behind wire-rimmed glasses. "You must be Sarah. I'm Margaret Chen, house manager. Please, come in." Sarah stepped into the apartment and immediately understood why discretion was required. The space was breathtaking. Floor-to-ceiling windows offered panoramic views of Central Park, while the interior was filled with what she suspected were original artworks and antique furniture that probably cost more than most people's houses. Hello, period. Today I have a story that will remind you that sometimes the people who see us most clearly are the ones we least expect. I hope you enjoy this tale of hidden truths and unexpected connections. The classified ad was simple enough. Housekeeper needed. Flexible hours. Discretion required. Good pay. Sarah Martinez stared at the newspaper clipping for the third time that morning, her coffee growing cold in the chipped ceramic mug. Discretion required. Those words should have been a warning, but when you're 3 months behind on rent and your bank account shows a balance of $47.23, warnings become luxuries you can't afford. She folded the paper carefully and placed it next to her laptop, where 17 job rejection emails sat in her inbox. Each one was a polite variation of the same message. "While your qualifications are impressive, we've decided to move forward with another candidate." What they didn't say, what they couldn't say, was that her qualifications were too impressive. Former corporate executives don't typically apply for entry-level positions, and when they do, it raises questions employers would rather not deal with. Sarah's fingers traced the edge of her resume, the one she'd carefully edited to remove her MBA from Columbia, her years as a financial analyst at Sterling and Associates, and the promotion to senior partner that had once felt like the culmination of everything she'd worked for. Now, that same resume felt like evidence of a life that belonged to someone else entirely. The morning sun streamed through the thin curtains of her studio apartment, illuminating dust motes that danced above cardboard boxes she still hadn't unpacked. Moving to this neighborhood had been a necessity, not a choice. The rent was affordable, which in Manhattan meant the walls were thin, the heat inconsistent, and the neighbors colorful in ways that would have horrified her former colleagues. She reached for her phone and dialed the number from the ad before she could change her mind. It rang twice before a crisp, professional voice answered. "Hawthorne Residence, Margaret speaking." "Hi, I'm calling about the housekeeper position. Are you available for an interview today at 2 p.m.? Sarah blinked. No screening questions, no request for references. "Yes, I can be there." "Excellent. The address is 847 Fifth Avenue, Penthouse A. Ask for Mrs. Chen at the front desk." The line went dead before Sarah could ask any follow-up questions. She stared at her phone, then quickly Googled the address. The building was one of those pre-war giants that dominated the Upper East Side, the kind of place where a one-bedroom apartment cost more than most people's annual salaries. 3 hours later, Sarah stood in front of an imposing limestone facade, her reflection wavering in the polished brass doors. She'd chosen her most conservative outfit, a navy blazer she'd bought for client meetings in her previous life, paired with simple black pants and flats. Professional but not intimidating, she hoped. The lobby was a study in understated luxury. Marble floors reflected crystal chandeliers, and the concierge desk was manned by someone who looked like he'd stepped out of a magazine ad for expensive watches. Sarah approached hesitantly. "I'm here to see Mrs. Chen about the housekeeper position." The concierge's expression didn't change, but she caught the slight way his eyes assessed her clothing, her posture, the small details that people in service industries learn to read. "Penthouse A. Margaret will meet you at the elevator." The elevator ride to the 42nd floor felt endless. Sarah watched the numbers climb and tried to calm her racing heart. She'd negotiated million-dollar mergers, presented to boards of directors, fired employees who made more in a year than she'd seen in the past 6 months. A job interview to clean someone's house shouldn't feel this terrifying. The elevator doors opened to reveal a small, elegant foyer with only one door. Before Sarah could knock, it swung open to reveal a woman in her 50s with silver hair pulled back in a perfect chignon and knowing eyes behind wire-rimmed glasses. "You must be Sarah. I'm Margaret Chen, house manager. Please, come in." Sarah stepped into the apartment and immediately understood why discretion was required. The space was breathtaking. Floor-to-ceiling windows offered panoramic views of Central Park, while the interior was filled with what she suspected were original artworks and antique furniture that probably cost more than most people's houses. "Impressive, isn't it?" Margaret's voice carried a hint of amusement. "Mr. Hawthorne has particular tastes." "It's beautiful," Sarah said honestly. Margaret led her through the main living area toward what appeared to be a library. The position involves general housekeeping, some light cooking, and maintaining Mr. Hawthorne's schedule when I'm unavailable. He travels frequently for business, so much of your work will be done independently. They passed through a hallway lined with photographs, black and white images of what looked like architectural projects, construction sites, and ribbon-cutting ceremonies. Sarah caught glimpses of a tall man with dark hair in several of the photos, usually shaking hands with people in suits or hard hats. "Mr. Hawthorne is in construction?" Sarah asked. "Development? Hawthorne Properties?" Margaret's tone was matter-of-fact, but Sarah felt her stomach clench. She knew that name. Everyone in New York real estate knew that name. They entered the library, and Sarah's breath caught. The room was stunning. Built-in bookcases stretched from floor to ceiling, filled with leather-bound volumes and what looked like architectural drawings. A large desk dominated one corner, its surface covered with blueprints and financial documents. "The pay is competitive," Margaret continued, naming a figure that made Sarah's eyes widen. It was more than she'd made in her last 3 retail jobs combined. Health insurance included, 2 weeks paid vacation, and a discretionary bonus at year-end. "It sounds too good to be true," Sarah said before she could stop herself. Margaret smiled. "Mr. Hawthorne values privacy and reliability above all else. He's willing to pay for both." "When would I start?" "Tomorrow, if you're available. Mr. Hawthorne is returning from a business trip, and he prefers the apartment to be in perfect condition." Sarah nodded, though something nagged at her. The whole process felt too easy, too convenient. In her experience, when things seemed too good to be true, they usually were. "Do you have any questions?" Margaret asked. "Will I be working alone most of the time?" "Yes. Mr. Hawthorne keeps irregular hours, and he values his privacy. You'll rarely interact with him directly." That should have been a relief, but something in Margaret's expression suggested there was more to the story. Still, Sarah needed this job too badly to ask probing questions. "I'll take it." Margaret's smile was genuinely warm. "Excellent. I'll have the paperwork ready for you tomorrow morning, 8 a.m. sharp." As Sarah rode the elevator back down to the lobby, she couldn't shake the feeling that she'd just stepped into something much more complicated than a simple housekeeping job. But with her bank account nearly empty and her pride already in tatters, complicated was a luxury she couldn't afford to worry about. The next morning, Sarah arrived at 847 Fifth Avenue, carrying a small bag with cleaning supplies and a change of clothes. Margaret met her at the private elevator with a smile and a stack of documents. "Standard employment paperwork," Margaret explained as they rode up. "You'll find everything you need in the supply closet, though I suspect you'll want to bring your own things. Mr. Hawthorne can be particular about scents and cleaning products." The apartment felt different in the morning light, less intimidating, more like a home someone actually lived in. Sarah noticed details she'd missed the day before: a coffee mug left on the kitchen counter, a book open on the side table, a suit jacket draped over a chair. "He's not here now?" Sarah asked. "Flight was delayed. He won't be back until this evening." Margaret handed her a key and a detailed list of tasks. "I'll be in my office if you need anything. It's the small room off the kitchen." Left alone, Sarah surveyed her new domain. The apartment was immaculate, which made her wonder what exactly she was being paid to clean. She started with the kitchen, working methodically through Margaret's list. Polish the granite countertops, organize the pantry, clean the already spotless appliances. It was while she was dusting the bookshelves in the library that she found the first clue. Tucked between two volumes on architectural history was a manila folder labeled Sterling and Associates, Riverside Development. Sarah's hands stilled on the dustcloth. She knew that file. She'd created it. Riverside Development had been her last major project before everything fell apart. A mixed-use complex that would have revitalized a struggling neighborhood in Queens. She'd spent months developing the financial models, negotiating with community groups, securing permits. It had been innovative, profitable, and socially responsible. Everything she'd tried to build her career on. It had also been killed in the scandal that ended her career. Sarah's hands shook as she opened the folder. Inside were photocopies of her original reports, her financial projections, even her preliminary designs for the community center that would have been the project's centerpiece. But these weren't the versions that had been presented to the board. These were her original documents before they'd been altered. Interesting reading? Sarah spun around, the folder clutching to her chest. A man stood in the doorway, tall, dark-haired, wearing an expensive suit that somehow made him look more approachable rather than intimidating. She recognized him from the photographs, though seeing him in person was different. His eyes were a striking grey-green, and they were watching her with an expression she couldn't read. "Mr. Hawthorne," she stammered, "I was just dusting, and this fell out, and I—" "You recognized your own work." It wasn't a question. Sarah's mind raced. She could deny it, claim she'd never seen the documents before. But something in his expression told her he already knew the truth. "How long have you known?" she asked quietly. "Since Margaret showed me your application. Sarah Martinez, former senior partner at Sterling and Associates. Graduated summa cum laude from Columbia, 5 years of exemplary performance reviews, and then—" He gestured to the folder. Gone, vanished from the industry without a trace. Sarah set the folder down carefully on the desk. "Then why hire me?" "Because you're the only person who can tell me what really happened to Riverside Development." The weight of those words settled between them. Sarah had spent months trying to forget about Riverside, about the accusations, about the way her colleagues had looked at her in those final days. Now, standing in this beautiful apartment with this man who apparently knew her whole sordid history, she felt exposed in a way that had nothing to do with her current employment situation. "I don't know what you think you know," she said carefully. "I know that you were set up." Marcus Hawthorne moved into the room, but kept his distance, as if he sensed she might bolt. "I know that someone at Sterling altered your projections to make the project look financially unfeasible. I know that when you tried to present the real numbers to the board, they accused you of fabricating data to save a failing project." Sarah's chest tightened. "You seem to know more than the ethics board did." The ethics board saw what they were meant to see. Carefully crafted evidence that painted you as either incompetent or dishonest. But I've seen the original documents. "How?" Marcus's smile was grim. "Because I was the developer. Hawthorne Properties was going to be the primary contractor for Riverside Development. When the project was cancelled, I lost a significant investment, but more importantly, I lost the chance to build something meaningful." Sarah sank into one of the leather chairs, her legs suddenly unsteady. "You've known all along. This job, bringing me here, it's not about housekeeping." "No," Marcus said gently, "it's about justice." The afternoon sun cast long shadows across the library as Marcus explained what he'd discovered. After Riverside Development was cancelled, he'd launched his own investigation. The altered financial projections, the fabricated cost overruns, the convenient timing of the ethics complaint, it all pointed to one person, Richard Sterling, the senior partner who'd been Sarah's mentor and, she'd thought, her ally. Sterling was being pressured by other developers, Marcus explained. Riverside would have set a new standard for community-focused development. A lot of people had a lot to lose if that model became the norm. So he sacrificed me to protect his other relationships, Sarah said bitterly. More than that, he used your reputation for integrity against you. When you discovered the altered documents and tried to present the real numbers, he was ready with evidence that you were the one who had falsified the data. Sarah felt the familiar rage building in her chest, the same fury that had sustained her through the ethics hearing and the industry blacklisting. But underneath it was something else, a tiny spark of vindication. She hadn't been crazy. She hadn't been wrong. "Why are you telling me this?" she asked. "Because I want to revive Riverside development, and I need the person who originally designed it to make it happen." The proposition was staggering. Marcus had spent the past year quietly acquiring the necessary properties, securing new permits, and building relationships with community leaders. He had the resources and the connections to make Riverside a reality, but he needed someone who understood the project's original vision. "I can't go back to that world," Sarah said. "I'm blacklisted. No one will work with me." "They will if you're working for me." Over the next several weeks, Sarah found herself living a double life. Mornings were spent maintaining the fiction of her housekeeping job, cleaning rooms that barely needed cleaning, organizing spaces that were already immaculate. But afternoons were different. Once Margaret left for the day, she and Marcus would spread the Riverside documents across his dining room table and begin the painstaking work of rebuilding the project from the ground up. It was during these sessions that Sarah began to see past Marcus's wealth and reputation to the man underneath. He was passionate about architecture, about creating spaces that served communities rather than just generating profit. He asked thoughtful questions about her designs, pushed her to think bigger and bolder, and listened to her ideas with a respect she'd rarely experienced in her previous career. "You're not what I expected," Sarah told him one evening as they worked on revised community space plans. "What did you expect?" "Someone more corporate, more interested in the bottom line than the social impact." Marcus set down his pen and looked at her. "I grew up in a neighborhood not unlike the one where Riverside will be built. I know what it's like to live somewhere that's been written off by developers who only see dollar signs." "Is that why you wanted to do this project?" "Partly, but also because I saw what you'd created. The original design wasn't just about housing or retail space. It was about building community. That's rare in this industry." Sarah felt her cheeks warm under his gaze. Working together had developed a rhythm, a shorthand that felt natural and easy. She'd almost forgotten how satisfying it was to collaborate with someone who understood her vision. "What happens when this is finished?" she asked. "What do you mean?" "The project will be built and I'll have to find another job. I can't keep pretending to be your housekeeper forever." Marcus was quiet for a long moment. "I've been thinking about that. Hawthorne Properties needs a new head of community development. Someone who understands that building isn't just about construction, it's about creating spaces where people can build lives." The offer hung between them, laden with possibilities Sarah didn't dare examine too closely. "You'd be taking a big risk, hiring me." "I've been taking a risk from the moment I placed that job ad," Marcus said. "You could have refused to work with me. You could have tried to expose what I was doing. Instead, you chose to trust me. I needed the job. You needed a job. You didn't need this job. You could have walked away at any time." Sarah realized he was right. Somewhere along the way, this had stopped being about survival and started being about something else entirely. She'd rediscovered her passion for the work, but more than that, she'd discovered something unexpected with Marcus. "There's something else," Marcus said quietly. Something I should have told you from the beginning. Sarah's heart clenched. What? I didn't just know about your work from the Riverside files. I'd been following your career for years. Your presentation on sustainable urban development at the National Planning Conference, I was in the audience. Your article in Architectural Review about community responsive design, I kept it on my desk for months. You knew who I was before the scandal? I knew you were brilliant. I knew you were everything that was right about this industry. When I heard what happened, I started investigating because I couldn't believe someone like you would do what they accused you of. Sarah felt tears prick her eyes. All this time, I thought I was fooling you, playing a part. You were never playing a part. You were being exactly who you've always been, someone who cares more about building communities than building profits. The next morning, Sarah arrived at the apartment to find Margaret waiting with a knowing smile and a cup of coffee. Mr. Hawthorne has something he wants to show you, Margaret said. He's waiting in the library. Sarah found Marcus standing beside his desk, which was covered with architectural drawings and what looked like legal documents. He looked up as she entered, and she saw excitement in his eyes. The permits came through, he said simply. Sarah's breath caught. All of them? All of them. We can break ground on Riverside development next month. The reality of it hit her like a wave. After everything, the scandal, the blacklisting, the months of uncertainty, Riverside development was going to be built. Her vision, her work, would become reality. There's something else, Marcus said, and Sarah heard nervousness in his voice. I meant what I said about the job offer, but I should clarify something. What? It wouldn't just be a job, it would be a partnership. Hawthorne Properties needs someone who can lead our community development division, but more than that, I need someone who shares my vision for what this company can become. Sarah looked at the plans spread across the desk. Her plans, refined and expanded, but still recognizably hers. Equal partners? Equal partners. And us? What we've built here, working together, what happens to that? Marcus stepped closer, and Sarah felt her heart rate quicken. I hope that what we've built here is strong enough to build on. 6 months later, Sarah stood in the community center at the heart of Riverside development, watching children play in the garden she'd designed and families gather in the common spaces she'd envisioned. The project had exceeded even her original expectations, becoming a model for community-responsive development that was already being replicated in other cities. Marcus appeared beside her, 2 cups of coffee in hand. Penny for your thoughts? I was thinking about that first day when you found me with the files. I was so scared you'd fire me. I was scared you'd quit. Why? Because I'd spent so much time thinking about you, about your work, about what kind of person could create something like this. When I finally met you, I realized I'd been falling for you long before I knew your name. Sarah turned to face him, seeing the vulnerability in his expression. You fell for my work. I fell for your mind first, your heart second. Your work was just the evidence of both. And now? Now I'm hoping you'll let me spend the rest of my life learning everything else there is to know about you. Sarah looked around the bustling community center, then back at Marcus. I have one condition. Name it. No more secrets. No more pretending to be something I'm not. Marcus smiled, the expression transforming his face. Deal. Though I have to say, you were terrible at pretending to be a housekeeper. I was not. Sarah, you organized my financial documents by fiscal year and color-coded my architectural drawings. Most housekeepers don't do that. Sarah laughed, feeling lighter than she had in years. I suppose I should stick to what I'm good at. What you're good at is building communities, creating spaces where people can flourish, turning dreams into reality. And what are you good at? Marcus took her hand, intertwining their fingers. I'm good at recognizing potential, at seeing what something could become, not just what it is. Is that what you did with me? No, Marcus said softly. With you, I saw exactly what you were from the beginning. Someone extraordinary who just needed the right opportunity to shine. As the sun set over the community garden, painting the sky in shades of gold and pink, Sarah reflected on the strange turns her life had taken. A job that seemed too good to be true had led her to work she loved, a community she'd helped build, and a partnership that had grown into something beautiful and real. Sometimes, she thought, the best things in life come disguised as something else entirely. Sometimes you have to lose everything to find what you were really looking for all along. Because in the end, it's not about the titles we hold or the reputations we build. It's about the connections we make, the communities we create, and the courage to be vulnerable enough to let someone see who we really are behind all the roles we play. Margaret appeared in the doorway of the community centre, her expression fond as she watched Sarah and Marcus together. I told you he had good instincts, she said to no one in particular. What's that? Sarah asked. Oh, nothing. Just an old woman enjoying the fact that her matchmaking skills are as sharp as ever. Sarah stared at her. Matchmaking? Did you really think it was coincidence that your resume landed on his desk? That the job was posted in exactly the section of the paper you read every morning? That the timing worked out so perfectly? Marcus looked sheepish. I may have asked Margaret to help me figure out how to meet you. So the whole thing was a setup? The job was real. The project was real. The feelings were real, Marcus said earnestly. I just needed help with the logistics. Sarah shook her head, but she was smiling. You two are incorrigible. We're effective, Margaret corrected, and we're very good at recognizing when two people are meant to be together. As they walked home through the streets of the neighborhood they'd helped transform, Sarah marveled at how much had changed in such a short time. The work had given her purpose, but Marcus had given her something else, the reminder that she was worth knowing, worth loving, worth fighting for. So, Marcus said as they reached their apartment. Their apartment, Sarah corrected herself, still getting used to the idea. What's next? What do you mean? We've got 3 new projects in development, a team of architects who worship the ground you walk on, and a community centre that's been featured in 5 national magazines. What's the next dream we're going to make reality? Sarah thought about it, looking up at the stars barely visible through the city lights. I want to build a school, not just any school, one that's integrated into the community, where kids can learn from the neighborhood around them. Tell me more. As they climbed the stairs to their home, Sarah began to sketch out her vision, a place where education and community intersected, where children could grow up understanding that they were part of something larger than themselves. Marcus listened, asked questions, and by the time they reached their door, they were already planning their next project together. Later that night, as Sarah fell asleep in Marcus's arms, she thought about the journey that had brought her here. The scandal that had felt like an ending had actually been a beginning. The job that had seemed like a step backward had been a step toward everything she'd never known she wanted. And the man who had seen her secret, who had known exactly who she was before she'd ever walked into his apartment, had given her the greatest gift of all, the chance to be herself, fully and completely, without apology or pretense. If you enjoyed this story, please leave a comment, and remember, sometimes the best opportunities come disguised as something else entirely. See you soon.